Hi, so we will continue our discussion on these theories. So to recap, for inquiry learning has to do with discovery. It has that foundational principle mainly, and student-centered, as well as it facilitates communication. And really the main focus on inquiry learning is to encourage students to communicate, to think critically, and to collaborate with other students in order to solve a question or to get to a certain outcome or conclusion. And so within this, educators take the facilitator role throughout the inquiry process, but then they will, at the end of it, will guide students in a reflection where students are able to look back on what they've done and kind of reflect what went well, what didn't go well, and what they can do to further their knowledge for next time. So this kind of just gives us a visual of what inquiry learning theory has entails. And so one of the most, I guess the most basic visuals that I can provide, and one that is most used within inquiry learning theory, is the 5E learning cycle. And this just gives us a visual representation of the stages that students go through when they engage in inquiry learning. And so students first start with engagement. This looks like either they're presented with a question or they are given time to explore their own question based on a topic given. Regardless, this is when students are first actively engaged, and the role of engagement is to keep them enticed and keep them interested in the whole process throughout the entire time. And so students, though it's our first step, it is the underlying propeller, if you will, for the entire process, where students are engaged fully for each of these steps to be most effective. And on the flip side of that, if students are not engaged, if they're not interested in what they are studying, if they're not fully have a say or have a desire to study or to inquire about the topic, then this learning theory will not be as successful. And so this just goes straight into the next stage, or the next cycle, next E, which is exploration. And this is where students are given the opportunity to explore in any capacity that is available to them. And so whether that's be through research, whether that be through experiences that are given to them, discussions, various ways that educators can provide exploration opportunities for students. And this is when students, again, get further engaged into the process. And they spend a lot of time exploring. And the reason they spend a majority of the time in exploration is because the other steps that follow exploration have to do with their experience through what they have explored, what they have experienced throughout this process. And so the next stage that they go through is explanation. And explanation just really is them formulating thoughts and compiling thoughts based on what they've experienced and through exploration. And so this comes with maybe discussions where they have discussion groups, or they have a writing assignment that helps them determine what they learned through their exploration. And to go along with that, they elaborate. So this can go with them, again, they have an opportunity to discuss, to look on their peers' point of view on the experience and gain insight from others. And so they again look back at their own explanation and they elaborate on it. And they kind of pick and choose, or they gain information from others and further inquire on their own view of the process. And then the last point is, I think, probably the most effective and the most important of the whole experience is evaluation. And this is when, which we've discussed before, is when teachers now are involved in this process, in this stage where they encourage students to talk about the process as a whole. And this goes from the beginning to the end, the engagement to the elaboration, where students look at their entire experience, however long that is, and they evaluate what went right, what didn't go right, and what could they have done to make it better in the future, and how they were able to gain information from the start to the finish. And so I think this is the most important part, because students will kind of synthesize all of their information and will be able to kind of make a main idea sentence from what they have learned in this entire experience, and be able to pinpoint that within the evaluation. This can also come in some sort of an assessment based on what they've completed. And so that can look however the teacher wants that to look based on the topic presented. And one thing I really like and enjoyed researching on within the inquiry learning platform theory really is that this is an open-ended theory where it can be applied to any subject in any topic. And I have seen this work really well within literature circles, where students are given the opportunity to expand on their own prior knowledge and compare that to other people's experiences and explore on their own. And it works really well, especially to engage adolescent learners that I teach. I teach middle school reading. I teach 7th grade, and sometimes it's a little challenging to engage them in learning, especially if it's not particularly a book or a subject that they like. Using inquiry learning kind of gives them the control of the learning process, and gives them that opportunity to showcase what they already know, and then also give them a chance to explore something that they don't know, and also showcase that at the end of the lesson, which I found to be very powerful for them. Last theory we'll talk about is schema theory. And I liked this caption with schema theory because it talks, schema theory talks about thinking. Mainly it is the thought process, what goes on in the brain. And so we all know that the brain is comprised of two sides, the left side being the logical side and the right side being the creative side. And so really it's teaching students how to think about their thinking, and we'll get into that in this slide. So the foundational principles of the schema theory come from Thorndike and Huey during the 20th century cognitive development movement. And this was a particular time in the early 20th century, early to middle 20th century, where cognitive development was being further discovered. And so schema theory also revolves around schemata or schema. A schema is a bit of knowledge revolved around a topic that is kind of stored up in the mind, whether that is a topic that is academic, whether that is a skill that the students have learned. It can be as involved as their ability to read, or as less involved as their ability to hold a pencil. And so really schema refers to any bit of information, knowledge that they have gained in their past. And a collection of schema is called a schemata. And really that's just a collection of topics, or a collection of experiences or thought process that come together based on things that correlate to each other. And so this can look like, within their schemata of reading, it can look like having every bit of information that they have gained from learning how to read, to sight words, vocabulary, inferencing, text structure, pronunciation. All of those things can be formed into one schemata. And this also refers to the process that learners apply stored information to present experiences. And that was one thing that I was drawn to with this theory, was that the schema theory has to do with not only gaining these experiences, but using these experiences for using this information for present experiences, and incorporating their prior knowledge to present circumstances. And so schema theory, we see a lot of this through reading comprehension. And that is mainly the foundation for the schema theory. In its genesis was applied to reading comprehension, as the reader takes information presented, and whether that's information that they have some idea where it's coming from, they understand the topic that is being discussed, and they have some sort of prior knowledge to it, so they're able to infer on the author's intended purpose. And then from there apply meaning to the present schema. So that's when they're able to marry their past, their schema that they already have, to present schema that is being built, and create new schema. And this whole process is based mainly on the foundation of metacognition. And this is thinking about one's thinking or thought process. And really, for schema theory to be effective, educators must give time for students to think about their thinking. And this comes with time of just looking back and seeing what was the author trying to say, and what can they gain from the whole process? What can they gain in understanding? What can they infer? As well as what can they take away for future use? And also making connections and seeing patterns is another stage in reading comprehension, using the schema theory. So we will pause right there, and we will begin the correlations in the next segments.